Hello, I'm Wilbur Anderson. People call me Andy, especially those who that I consider really good friends. And I grew up in Hood River, Oregon, which is a valley, and the people grow tree fruit mostly, and my folks had a pear farm. So I went to a small grade school and then to a rural high school. And the thing I liked about the high school most of all was that they had a Future Farmers of America program. And I loved showing animals and being involved in the judging of animals, and particularly liked the shop. I'd built a lot of stuff out there in the shop. There was one year that I built 12 orchard trailers and sold them, and during that I was able to win the Lincoln Arc Welding Contest, National Arc Welding Contest, and so that was kind of a nice thing that I accomplished. In 1957, I went to Oregon State College. That was before it was called a university, in fact, and started in horticulture. And probably the most important thing that happened in my period of time there was that the first week I met my future wife, and that was a very important part of the rest of my life. We finished Oregon State, and I went to work for the Oregon State University's Research Center in Hood River again. I went back to Hood River, and I was a technologist there for several years. During that period of time, the Soviet Union sent up satellites, and as a nation we became very concerned about our safety, and as a result of that, President Kennedy decided that we really needed to have a lot more science. And so there was all kinds of scholarships that came available, and I got a chance to go to Texas A&M and started graduate school there. After that, I went to the University of California, Riverside, and started my PhD in plant science, plant physiology. And in 1969, we moved to Mount Vernon, and I started to work for Washington State University as a horticultural researcher, and was there for 30 years. At the end of that period of time, I had become the manager of the station and was involved in the renewal of the station, and also the developing of the WSU Discovery Garden, which is run by the Master Gardener program. And so that brings us up to December 2000, when I retired. During graduate school, we had 2 kids, and then we had our 3rd child just at the end of graduate school. And so they all grew up pretty much right here in the Skagit Valley. And fortunately now 2 of the 3 live here, and that's a very important part of our lives. When we came here, we were involved in visiting a number of different churches, and we finally settled on going to Bethany Covenant Church. It was interesting that was not our choice. It actually occurred that David, our youngest son, was decided he was going to go to Bethany, and so we ended up following him, and so that's how we became involved at Bethany, and then I've been involved with the leadership of the church for quite a few years. Well, once we retired, I started being involved with volunteers and gardeners. And I worked with several different groups over the next several years. And then I became aware that working with volunteers was leaving something out that I felt that was very important. And that was the fact that it needed to have a Christian emphasis, and none of the groups that I was involved in had that. So we made some suggestions to the Bethany Covenant Church leadership, and they allowed us to start putting a garden together just east of the rear parking lot of the church. And so that started in the spring of 2007. Now it is 2018. That's 12 seasons that have gone by. Each year we have grown the garden a little bit, either by increasing our capacity out in the garden. And the other aspect is the fact that we have increased in the number of folks who have found that they enjoy gardening and want to participate. And so during this period of time, we have now gotten to the point where we have, on average, about 20 people that come on Mondays and Friday mornings to work with us. The first 6 years were primarily we're involved in developing of the infrastructure, the raised beds, the greenhouse, the tomato shelter, trickle irrigation in the garden, and all these things that needed to be done in order to have a really successful garden and be able to produce the amount of products that we needed to produce. We start every year in January because we have to have a bunch of seedlings of the right size to be able to start when the garden season is available to us. And we are at the stage where we produce at least 2 crops per season in each area of our garden. And that's necessary for us to be able to produce the amount of products that we have to produce in order to satisfy our needs. We are now at that stage where we don't have any added space. And so the only way we can increase production is by being more efficient and producing more per square foot of the garden space that we have. One of the techniques that we do have in this is using as many soil warming techniques as we possibly can. And that includes the raised beds, increase the drainage so that we don't have the amount of water that would be in a waterlogged soil. We also use infrared transmissible mulches that allow us to get added heat into the soil. We also grow as many transplants as we possibly can and schedule them so that we have a maximum production and something that's going to fill the land each time that we take something out. And also it reduces the length of time that the garden, the vegetables have to be in the garden by about 3 weeks by transplanting. Every season we have a problem and we think we're going to solve them all, and we never do. There's always a new problem. We, first of all, have lots of rabbits, and they were doing a lot of damage in the garden. And so we ended up putting in a fencing system that we thought was going to be adequate. Well, we found that a 1x2 slot in the fence was too large and the rabbits could go through them. So we had to put another chicken wire fence in around it. Then we thought we had things solved. And we still had problems with the lettuce getting all kinds of holes in it. And then we found that it was these little birds that come in by the hundreds that just land in the lettuce patch and just peck all these holes. So we found that using spun polyethylene row covers, which allows light to get in and water to penetrate through, kept the birds away. And we got rid of that problem. Well, the only thing is there'll be another problem coming up in the future, and we will have to come up with another solution as these problems come along. And so we'll always will have a problem to deal with in the future. One of the things that we're very concerned about is that we feel that having the devotion time to start the garden each time we get together is very important, because it gives us a sense of focusing on Christian things, as well as giving us an opportunity to share with each other about things of concern in people's lives. And so that's a very important part of our garden meetings. Well, one of the things that we've been involved with this year is we've increased the amount of flowers production. And so a couple of us have gone out one afternoon a week and made about 7 or 8 bouquets and delivered them to people that are sharing our lives with. And so that has been really great. And it's the sharing of ourselves. I find that it's important for us to be able to share food, vegetables, flowers, and the thing of it is, it gives us the opportunity to share friendship with others. And that's a very critical and important part of our the action that comes from our faith in the Lord, to be able to be working and helping others. The most important part of this is I have a strong sense of need for community, to be involved with other people. And so we get a chance to teach some things about gardening with folks. We have the opportunity of working with others out in the garden. And incidentally, the thing that I really enjoy most of all is just when we get pictures and videos of people working in the garden. They always have a smile on their face. And I think that is profound. Because you might be out there just weeding or thinning carrots or doing other mundane things, and yet people enjoy being out there working together, and that's very satisfying. And I've become aware that people really are involved in the garden because they want to share with others. And I just love that. And so it becomes a place where we all get to practice our faith of caring and loving for each other. Well, I do have this thing, and I'm going to read it because I'm probably it wouldn't come out quite as well as I'd like it to. But in summary, it's through the community garden that we share vegetables and flowers and friendship. It has become an avenue of God's provision for many. I think that's kind of sums it up. And it's probably about as concise a statement as I can make. This is the area where community garden things to do. This, from the very back here is when we started in January, and now we will be in the garden again. And I'll have another things to do list for people to be working in the garden. Here we are. This is the nerve center of getting things ready for the garden. We actually start our program the last week of January because by early February we have enough light that we can use the greenhouse to grow things. So we start out right there at the beginning. We sequence plant, sow our seeds so that we have a continuum of plant material going into the garden for the whole gardening season. We actually start planting out in late March, and we will continue planting until sometime in mid-July, and so that we will have a consistent production of vegetables over the 15-week period that we actually put out the Share Package project. One of the other things, after you get through with getting the seedlings and the transplants, we use this greenhouse to grow tomatoes and peppers and basil. And so the greenhouse gets used pretty much the whole season. Well, one of the things that we like to do in this garden is to maximize our production. And so we use transplants as a major part of the production scheme. That means that we're able to save about 3 weeks off of each crop that goes into the ground, and we like to get at least 2 crops per piece of ground each year. And we grow the whole range of vegetables. That includes starting out with the cool season crops like sugar snap peas, broccoli, cabbage, radishes, those types of things. And then we move right into the warm season crops, which include the things like corn and squash and cucumbers, things like that. We this piece right here has had at least one other crop in it this spring, and now we're just finishing off with beans. We grow at least we do a lot of sequence production too, so that we've been having beans. This is our third crop of beans, and so we've been harvesting beans since about early July. We do the same thing with our cucumbers, our summer squash. This actually is our third planting of summer squash that we've had. We grow, things like tomatoes and peppers and all the other crops too that you would have in a normal garden situation, so that we have at least 5 or 6 different items that are going into our share package project. Well, one of the very important areas in the garden is an area to get our plant material ready to go into the garden. We do a lot of transplanting, and so this area becomes a place where we take the plants out of the pots and put them into, get them ready to be planted out into the garden. So that's one of the areas, one of the things that we do here. The other thing is, when the plant material we harvest, we have all kinds of dirt on the carrots and beets and other root crops and other crops that need to have some trimming and so on. This is the place that we do it, and we get it all ready so that it's ready to go into the share package project. One of the important crops that we grow are tomatoes, and we do have this little problem here in the Skagit Valley of late blight on tomatoes. It's a fungus disease, and the spores fly all over the place, so wherever you got tomatoes, you got the potential for those spores landing and causing disease if the right conditions are there. So one of the things that we found that help us overcome that problem is to use a roof over the tomatoes, and that makes it possible to not have free water on the foliage. And the foliage needs free water in order for the spores to germinate, and so we overcome that disease problem by just keeping the foliage dry by the covering we have here. And so that's the way we are able to grow lots of tomatoes. It's a real staple for us, and one that people really enjoy having. One of the things we really love to do in our share package project is to put flowers in. We always try to put a bouquet in our weekly packaging that we do. This year we had about 22 different stops, and that amounts to about 45 people. So we start out with sweet peas, and that's one of the earliest flowers we start growing, and it's just about right for the beginning of our packaging in mid-July, or mid-June, excuse me. And so we weekly put these packages together. They always have about 5 or 6 different varieties of vegetables and flower arrangement. And one of the things we really love is the dahlias, because they start in early July and will be producing flowers right up to the end. Our group enjoys growing all the herbs, and we find that growing them in pots is a real good way of doing it. One of the things that these black pots do for us is it adds a little more heat, and also it makes it so they're contained. And some of things like peppermint and things like that, they can get to be a real pest spreading out all over the place. This is another one of our areas where we grow a range of flowers, because we add these to our bouquets, and it works out real good for us. And back here is our beans that we grow for dry beans. This is another little project that we have, which is for the Children of the Valley after school program. They will take these beans, the dry beans, and make chili out of them at Thanksgiving time.